We're pretty happy, man. You got a team 2 wins away from being in the World Series, and they're coming home. It's honestly, it kind of led to a conversation that I think you would be.
The M's haven't been in the World Series, right?
Never.
No.
Never happens. Never.
Oh,
never
how
happens.
exciting.
In fact, they've never won 3 games in the ALCS. They've never even been a game away. They are as close right now as they've ever been.
Wow.
So,
way to put the announcer's jinx on
well,
them.
that's sort of my question for you. So, pressure and expectations. It's we ended up starting the show this morning talking about having a killer instinct, how to handle high expectations, how to handle being ahead, how to handle being a favorite. It strikes, and Brock and I have talked about this a ton, strikes us that has been one of the great curses in sports, certainly in football in the last decade, is teams really struggling to handle success. What do you think is the secret to it, to finding a way to not get caught up in the pressure of having a lead?
Yeah, it's simple to say, hard to execute, but it's being process-oriented and not results-oriented. If you're results-oriented and you start thinking about, what's going to happen if, X, Y, or Z happens, then you get totally away from your process. But those that are, the Nick Sabans of the world that dive right back into, well, this is just how we operate. It doesn't matter if it's June 15th or if it's October 15th. This is how we approach every at-bat. This is how we approach these situations. This is how we prepare our pitching staff to go out and attack. Those are the teams that generally have success in these, what we'd call like big moments, where the result is in a different stratosphere than the result on June 15th. Because if you go out there and I'm trying to win the NLCS. No. You're trying to execute this pitch. You're trying to, put together a quality at bat, just like you would any other time. It's this dumb golf adage of like one shot at a time. Get in your process, get in your routine, and the teams that can do that generally have success in these closeout or result-oriented type of games. And this transcends sports, by the way. This transcends any sport, anything. If you go in and you're like, well, this sale is going to be so much bigger, and you start changing everything you're going to do, and you're like, well, I got to do it differently and bigger because the result is bigger. Well, then you're going to fail. So it's got to be process-oriented and not results-oriented.
Joel, from your life experience, and I was chatting with Salk earlier about a killer instinct and finishing teams, and from a couple of the teams that I got fortunate to play on, when you truly love your brother and you think more about your brother and think more about your teammate than you do yourself, man, it to me eases so much of that burden of results. From your life experience of professional baseball and high-level college football, is there a difference between the two sports, the clubhouse, the locker room, the game, in that manner?
Yeah, because football is so inherently a team game. Like you have to have all 11, in particular on offense, all 11 do their job, and if they don't, it fails. Now, baseball is way different because the process is actually individual. You've got to handle your business, and those that love their teammates the most will handle their business with a lot more efficiency and professionalism than the guys that are just in it for themselves and don't really care. Their at-bats are different. Their preparation is different. The way that they talk game plan with the other players is different. But baseball is so much more similar to golf than it is to football. Football is a real team sport. Baseball is not. You just have to trust that pitcher, and particularly like a middle reliever. And I know the M's have a pretty good bullpen, if I'm not mistaken. But you've got to trust that he went through his preparation. But like, I don't know what his preparation is. I'm just sitting there over at third base. So I'm just like, hey man, throw a strike. Like that's all I want out of that guy. It's like, stop, nibbling at, you get 2 strikes. Like, give me an out pitch. So it is a lot different, but what is similar is the more you care about your teammates, the better care you will have for your own process. And I think that's where there is some crossover.
We talk about that killer instinct, and in football, it does feel like in game, not like necessarily.
Well, I think this is a fascinating discussion because you guys keep bringing up like this killer instinct. I disagree. I don't think that you have to have killer instinct. You should have urgency in your preparation at all times.
Okay, so
and
yes.
those that aren't wowed by the moment end up having this perception of killer instinct, but all they're doing is executing the simple details. It's just a bigger moment.
So I agree with all of that. And then kind of spinning it to in-game in the NFL sometime or in college. Sometimes the play calling becomes a part of that. How do you want to handle the end of a game, the last 10 minutes when you're up 2 scores? Do you want to try to run out the clock? Do you want to try to be more aggressive? And that's where I was going to take this. I don't know if you got to see the Seahawks game and the way it ended in Jacksonville, but they have kind of a choice of what to do late in that game. They get the ball back. They're up a score. How do you want to handle it? And what do? They throw what it ended up being a 61-yard play deep down the field in play action to a tight end that essentially is the aggressive play that ices the game. I'm kind of curious what you think goes into making a play like that from Darnold to A.J. Barner.
I believe that is going out there and not trying to force your desire onto the game. It's like, yeah, you want to close out the game, but part of what makes the offense is we're going to go out there and we're going to attack the weaknesses of the defense. So where they give us an opportunity, we have to be willing, number one, and able to attack that and execute. So quick story, and I know like people won't obviously remember this, but we welcomed, when I was playing a lifetime ago, we welcomed Oklahoma in. This is Jason White and that great Oklahoma team in like 2003, and they were ranked number 1. Teddy Lehman's their linebacker, and we had come off a couple of losses, and we got into a position where our offense started to play well, shockingly, and like we get within 6 with about 3 minutes to go, and we had played well enough where it's like, okay, just get us the ball back and we're going to have a chance. So like, what does OU do at that point? Well, OU trusted what their offense was. And so they didn't just come out and say like, well, the smart thing to do is just hand it off 3 times and do these things that some book would tell you to do. They went out there and they looked at what we did defensively and they saw man coverage, bump coverage, and they thought, okay, well, if we're going to do this in the second quarter and take advantage of that bump coverage, we're going to take advantage of that bump coverage now. And they threw a fade, for a first down, and it goes down, and they ended up scoring a touchdown. And it looks like they went out there to be aggressive. But I would push back on that. They didn't go out there to be aggressive. They went out there to attack the defense. What is the defense giving us? If they want to sit back, we'll run the football. If they don't, then we'll attack. I also called a game a few years ago when Pete Kwiatkowski, who you guys know was a Washington defensive coordinator, it was his first year at Texas. Sark is there. It's his first year. They're playing Mike Gundy's Oklahoma State team, and this was a veteran Oklahoma State team that ended up winning or going to and playing the Big 12 championship. I can't remember if they won that one. I think that they won this one. But anyways, like Texas gets within a score, and you think to yourself, like, okay, like what's going to happen here? And Pete Kwiatkowski stays with 2 safeties back. He plays cover 2, and so Oklahoma State just ran the ball at him. And, it's not that they were going out there to be aggressive or to be patient and drown out the clock. It goes back to my original answer. You stay within your process. What are you and what are you going to do? Well, we're going to go take advantage of what the defense is going to give. And those are the teams that generally have success. I love that from Seattle. Seattle's playing really well. Darnold continues to play well. And I would just say like Jaxon Smith-Njigba is one of the best receivers in the National Football League. That guy is phenomenal. I love watching him play.
You and Gus called 52 Ohio State games of Jackson's 53 that he played there. Did you ever think when you watched him there, he would be one of the 3 best receivers in the – you did. You thought he had enough juice to do that.
Yes. I was actually, truth be told, and this is going to sound disparaging. It's not meant to be disparaging. When Seattle drafted him, I was disappointed because I thought if he went to a guy like McVay or someone like that, I was like, oh, yeah, like someone's going to use him all. And he went to Seattle, and it's like, geez, like Pete and Geno, like what's he going to do with Pete and Geno? You know, and sure enough, like it didn't necessarily materialize because I didn't think it was a great fit. But now it's a little different, right? Like he's got a quarterback that understands how to utilize him, play efficiently, attack the middle part of the field. His short area quickness and explosiveness, I should say, it's more explosiveness, makes him perfect for his role. He's really intelligent, and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson used to tell me in their practices, we would go and I would stand there, and I'm always a bit aggressive, so I would just go stand out with the wide receivers and Coach Hartline, you know, and Ryan used to let me do that. And I would talk to him, and Garrett and Chris would always say, like, well, Jackson's the best of us. You know, he's the best receiver here. And he's starting to prove that out in the NFL.
You know what's extraordinary too, Joel? The only question that I had, and DJ and I talked a lot about it through the process leading up to it and afterwards, is there enough speed? It's kind of like
speed. Yeah, that was always the question.
Yeah, it's like velo in baseball, right? We watch these guys and the difference between 98, 99 and 94, 90. And Jaxon was the fastest guy on Sunday in the NFL, a little over 21 miles an hour on a deep ball that he caught. Like no one ran faster than him on that Sunday in all the NFL. You're just seeing if he has that card and could truly play that fast, then you know what he's doing is the best, most productive receiver in the game. Probably shouldn't be surprising.
Well, and it's also, I use so many analogies.
You do?
So I do. A pitcher that throws 98, but is going to be over the fat part of the plate and doesn't have a great off-speed pitch, not that difficult to face. A pitcher that throws 96 but locates incredible and his off-speed stuff is under 86, so he gives you that 10-mile-an-hour delta. Now he's really difficult to face. Well, Jaxon Smith-Njigba is similar to that. He might not be the fastest guy. However, he is the smartest in a lot of ways, and he understands how to gain separation. And part of that separation means that he understands how to play with pace and tempo and patience at times, which then makes his 21 miles an hour feel like 23. You know, because he's playing at a certain pace and separation throughout the game, and then all of a sudden you're a DB and you're like, whoa, like what was that? I haven't seen it. You know, so his technical ability and I would say instincts and savvy as a route runner make him a lot more difficult to cover than a guy that's just like, well, he runs 23 miles an hour. I remember, I'm not going to name names. You could probably go back and figure this out. The 2019 Ohio State team that was very good, very good. This was Ryan's first year. And all these receivers are there. And we went to call their game at Indiana. And the Indiana defensive coordinator at the time shows up to our meetings, our production meetings, and he was like, yeah, our strength staff has a way to calculate miles per hour off of film. And he has told us that none of their players have run 21 miles an hour on the field. This is a dead true story. And our DBs, we know through the catapult system and the GPS, they run 22 miles an hour. So we feel very confident that we can play man coverage. And I just put my pen back in my book and I shut my little notebook and I was like, have a great game tomorrow. We're good. And I just shook my hands and true story. And I tell our producer, Chuck McDonald, director, Rich Dewey, and our whole crew at our production meeting. And I start the whole production meeting with this. I want every single filler graphic and storyline you got, because this is going to be an absolute blowout. And sure enough, the first series of the game, like they run a crossing route. I think it was Jaxon actually. And Jason takes the crossing route and he is running away from the defender for a 60-yard touchdown. And I'm just hitting the talkback button in my headset. And I was just going 20, 21, 22, 23 miles, and I was just, and we were, it turns out that defensive coordinator called me a year later and apologized for the meeting. He was like, hey, it's always stuck with me what I told you that day before the Ohio State game. And I just wanted to say, like, that was wild. And I was like, I knew you were getting blown out the minute you started talking about speed off of the film. So anyways.
So this week you're in the big house, right? So we'll do a quick little Washington Wednesday here, brought to you by Star Rentals, since you've got the Huskies.
Yeah, I got Washington.
And
that's
the
right.
Wolverines.
Gosh,
what do you expect to see? Give me a little
Is
Husky
DeMond
insight.
Williams fast? Do you think he's fast?
Yeah. Can he hit 22 miles an hour?
Yes, dude. It's short area quickness. He's like Kyler Murray light. I really like DeMond Williams. I really like him. I love Jonah Coleman, even though he didn't have a great game against Rutgers. I'm a huge fan of Denzel Boston. It worries me that Carver Willis is banged up, the left tackle, and specifically because Michigan moved this off the ball linebacker named Jaxon to edge. And this is very similar to Penn State when they moved Abdul Carter from off the ball linebacker to edge. And then he became, a top 10 pick, top 5 pick, and a great pass rusher. And that's what Barham is. So that worries me a little bit. That's a matchup. If I'm a Husky fan, I would be very keyed in on, this Maximus McCree against Jaxon Barham. That's something that worries me a little bit. But then, defensively, I look at this defense for Washington, and they're pretty good. Ryan has done a nice job. They're not, the best defense in the world, but they're giving up under 20 points right now. They mix up their coverages. They can play man. With Takario Davis on the field, they can certainly do a lot more things in coverage. I wish Zach Durfee was gonna play. I hope I'm not breaking news on that. Maybe I am. I don't know. I shouldn't say much. But here's the thing with Michigan. Michigan lost their identity against USC. They allowed them to run the football, which is a no-no. That's the first domino. And then they didn't start out running the football. And I feel like Washington is going to get, and Sharon Moore this week, he shows up with the, what was it, like the blue collar jacket, the mechanic's jacket, the bowling patch on it. He's got his name. I think that Washington better buckle up and realize, like, you're going to get an old school, physical
50 times
approach.
Yep.
Yeah, I really believe that, Brock. Those. You can. When you hear a coach talk about things like that, you're like, I know exactly what they're going to do. And so they're going to lean in and see if Washington is physical enough to stop them.
What a stage for DeMond. Obviously Underwood, the Michigan kid, the true freshman, all the hype, all the height, all the weight, all the arm talent, blah, blah, blah. And DeMond's starting to make his mark. But, man, is Saturday one heck of an opportunity for him. He goes in there and beats them. He goes around, runs around, and 300 yards of total offense or whatever it's going to take, and he's the difference maker, and he's the star that Jed Fish thinks he is. This is a Saturday that DeMond can turn a lot of national heads.
Joel, thank you, as always. Great stuff today, and we'll talk to you next week.
Salk,
appreciate it.
Salk, you and me have hit our stride.
We're really growing.
This is I tell you what, you only asked one average question.
Only one. Wow.
That is
I'm impressed I got up to one average question. Usually they're all below average.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you
stepped up, right? He stepped up.
You did an incredible job. I continue to be long-winded and don't allow you to get into all the topics that you want to. Tell stories that you don't want to hear about
I got all these
Indiana
notes.
defensive coordinator.
John Ross.
And you're like, I want to ask you about Sam Darnold. I want to ask you about Mike McDonald.
I want to ask you about Byron Murphy. I wanted to ask you about multiple tight ends. I got some stuff about how the game is going to change with all this under center stuff. But you know what? We'll do it next week.
I don't want to answer that, so I just tell stories and take up your time.
I can see that.
It's a filibuster.
Joel,
love you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. There's Joel Klatt.